Welcome back to A Celtic State of Mind. I'm Paul John Dykes, and today I am delighted to be joined by John Yogi Hughes and Patrick McGill. We're on time as well, Patrick. You and I knew not to be late today for the Acsom Bulletin. Absolutely no chance we get away with that 2 weeks in a row, John. Listen, loads to discuss. Why have we decided to go with a Kieran Tierney tagline? It was interesting, Patrick, because I looked at the archive of Acsom bulletins, and about this time last year, there's a Kieran Tierney tagline on Acsom. Is it one of those lazy kind of journalistic things where we're going back, or is there merit in it? That's the big discussion, because we spoke about Kieran yesterday, and some of the comments were basically, get over it, it's no happening. It can't happen. Kieran Tierney's spoken about it himself as well, of course, a return to Celtic. And what I took from his quotes, he doesn't want to do it when he's over the hill. He didn't say that exactly. I'm obviously surmising. It's not verbatim. He wants to do it while he can still be at a level where he can perform for Celtic fans, which, of course, he is himself. What's your whole take on the Tierney thing before we get into anything else? When people say it can't be done, it can. We can. We can bend the finances in such a way that he gets a massive signing-on fee, for example. If you want to keep a wage structure, he still gets the same wage as everybody else, but he's got a massive signing-on fee. There are ways you can do deals like this, aren't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think it's out the realms of possibility based solely on wages and finance. I think, the upper echelon of our wages is something like 30 to 35 grand a week. I believe he's on 110 at Arsenal. Now, I mean, he's not getting game time at Arsenal, so if he will have to leave to get game time, and if he's going to leave, he's going to have to take a pay cut anyway. Whether he wants to choose Celtic and go down to say 30 to 35,000 a week, that's obviously, the ball's in his court there. I'm sure we would offer somewhere in that region. Um, you've also got the transfer fee. I don't think Arsenal would expect anything close to the 25 that they paid. I think it's between, I think it's something like 8 million I might have seen in Twitter. I don't know how true that is, but, that's obviously not outside our structure either. The question then for Celtic is whether we're willing to spend that money and pay that wage for a guy who's struggled with injury since December 2018. I think he played against Salzburg and, he was injured for the rest of that season, then was moved on and he's struggled ever since. But looking at his Wikipedia, he's actually played a decent number of games. I don't know how many are substitute appearances, but he's played 25, 30 games a season for the last 3-4 years. So if you can, you can't pick and choose what games you're fit for, but if you can play him in the big games and then rest him and, sort of split the time between him and Taylor 50-50, I think that would be a no-brainer if the option became available for Celtic. I don't think it's lazy, but there's obviously a very simple and easy connection to make between Tierney and Celtic. Not only has he played for us before, but he's also a Celtic fan. He's the type of player, you could argue like Brendan Rodgers is the type of manager that we can only attract because of their connection with Celtic.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's lazy. I think it's definitely a straightforward link, but I don't think it's lazy at all. And I think if it's a reasonable transfer fee in that sort of 7 to 8 million range, and he's willing to come back and earn say 30 grand a week, if we think that he's able to stay fit for 20 to 30 games a season, I would go for it. Actually, I think that's a no-brainer.
The thing with that is, again, we'll need to mention this because one of the comments I got yesterday made someone spit their Cocoa Pops out when they were watching the Acsom Bulletin at the absurdity of anybody taking a wage cut to such a degree. But as I say, you make the wages up in terms of a signing-on fee. And it's not a case of trying to hide figures, John. It's just so that you do have a wage structure there. But Patrick's right in what he says. In the 5 seasons since Kieran Tierney left Celtic, he's played on average 30 games a season. Now, it's not earth-shattering Callum McGregor levels, but who is? Let's be honest. But it's 30 games a season, John, and I actually take what Patrick says there. What do we play? 50, 55 games every campaign, usually? You could manage him in terms of the games that he plays. Don't always play him twice a week. Surely that would be a resolution to any injury concerns.
Yeah. However, not to burst bubbles, but you can make up his compensation but that's what all the other, nobody, Cal McGregor's agent then isn't going to walk into their next negotiation and discount a massive signing on fee. The guy's got a compensation package. So his compensation package will include signing on fee, salary, image rights, whatever else is involved in it. And that's what agents will be comparing. That's what players will be comparing. You simply, I don't believe you can simply, the breaking it down into a weekly wage thing is something we do. So we can try and get our heads around these massive figures. I mean, I did it on Twitter. I did that a couple of weeks ago, saying how it was terrible to see young football players falling in hard times because Kylian Mbappe is going to have to struggle through in 752 grand a week. Poor lad, he's basically on the streets,
Poor lads.
He'll be selling the big issue in a minute. So his compensation is, what is it, 100, off the top of my head, I didn't know we were going to talk this, so 128.5 million and signing on fee plus 38.5 million a year plus a percentage of his image rights. So he'll be getting 752 won't even include, a percentage of the image rights. So hopefully that makes up for him and keeps him off the streets, But yeah, I just don't see that that's something, because it's overall compensation the other players will be looking at, and how you break it down is neither here nor there. They're going to be looking at 15, 20, 30 million a year. Certainly that's what I would be looking at, because, trying to tell the other players, no, we haven't broken our wage structure because of this. I don't think that's viable. I don't think that will fly at all. In terms of him coming back, I'd be with the cocoa spitting man, whoever that was. I think that is a vast drop. If you work that out in how many millions a year that's going to take, for that to be made up. I just don't see it. Plus, he can also continue to play at a much higher level for a long time. I think it's just purely he wants to come back. Obviously, he's always going to say he wants to come back. That's almost certainly never going to happen. By the time he's in a position, financially, where, all right, okay, I've done my bit, and, be good to come back, we'll not want him. He will be broken down and over the hill.
Yeah.
So I just don't see it's realistic in any way. Plus, I think I said the other day, what did Arsenal get out of it? Explain to me how it benefits them to have a player in the last year of his contract go out on what is now people are talking about is a loan with an option to buy, or even an obligation to buy. But if it's a loan with an option to buy, how does that benefit Arsenal? He's in the last year of his career and he's going to go to an inferior league. He's injury prone. He's a depreciating asset, right? None of that benefits Arsenal. I don't understand why they would even contemplate that. And I don't think they are contemplating it, because you could quite clearly turn around and sell him to another top club for very, very good money.
There'll be loads of interest, John. Yeah.
I think he'd still command 25, 30 million easy. I don't understand. Yeah, I know. Look, it's great to think that we would have that level of player back, but we are going to have to, as always, we need to be shopping in Lidl for the diamonds that somebody's dropped between the bins. That's. But essentially, I don't see that as being realistic. To your point, I don't think it's a thing that's going to happen.
Well, it's one of these discussion points that we had last season. If it doesn't happen this season, Paddy, we will ban it from future discussion points. We don't want it to turn into a Paddy Roberts affair or a Mikey Johnson. Is this the season for MJ? What do you think in the comments? Let us know. Jungle Lion straight in there. Speaking of the Euros, which undoubtedly we will, on this day in 1988, Ray Houghton scored that goal against England and started the Ireland-Charlton fairy tale. I'll tell you something. It was incredible because that was really, John, I'm trying to think what age I would have been. I was 9-year-old when that happened. That's when I started in terms of being aware that Ireland had a right good side. Jack Charlton, It was Ray Houghton and Pat Bonner and goals, of course. By the time 1990 World Cup came around, we had Chris Morris at right back. And I've been an Ireland fan, football terms that is, probably since that goal that Ray Houghton scored. Got to be honest.
Well, I remember that very well for the reason that I was at a friend's wedding. Sean Corrigan, someone will know him, fishmongers in Glasgow, and it was his wedding, and there was about 600 people at it down in Seamill. Massive wedding, and basically Kathleen the bride was very, very, very unhappy because essentially he had to be hunted out of a room for the first dance. There was nobody there. The ballroom was just full of women. There was nobody there. Everyone just emptied up into the hotel rooms, whoever had booked a night, and got on the telly. And Sean had to be dragged down the stairs for the first dance. And they're still married to this day, so it didn't hurt them too much. But yeah, what a great day! What a great day that was. That was sensational. And the Charlton years. You think of some of the players there, you know, real quality players.
Yeah.
And again, you know, this is the beauty of the Irish diaspora because it's so widespread. Scotland just doesn't have that level of players to call on from like all around the world in leagues and have an Irish granny or a Scottish granny in our case. We just don't have the numbers aren't there, you know. So it was a sensational day. That was a sensational period. And Big Jack was a top man who's always featured heavily in any discussions about my dad because he obviously terrified him during those Leeds games. So, you know, around about the time we had that picture on the wall behind me there, actually. So I know it was a great time and a great memory for me.
Great era, as you say, because you could take it right up to USA '94. You know, Tommy Coyne by that stage was part of the squad. John Aldridge, I remember having a wee faux pas on the sidelines when he was trying to get stripped to come on as a sub. Brilliant memories. Yeah, I think Houghton scored another goal against Italy in that tournament, the World Cup 1990. Fantastic. But one of the best things that I learned by speaking to people involved in that, Paddy, was the introduction to the Celtic songbook of a song called The Fields of Athenry. And I remember being at a game and coming home and saying to my mum and dad, they sang The Fields of Athenry today, and it was the first time I had ever heard it at Celtic Park, right? In fact, it was at Hampden. It was at Hampden Park I'd heard it. And when I went home, I knew of the song because the old dear John used to go over to Knock once a year, you know what I mean, and come home with holy water and tapes and all this. And there was a version of The Fields of Athenry on one of these cassettes, and we played it to death. Loved it. Great tune. And then I heard it at Celtic Park, and I thought, this is incredible. You know which player, Patrick, claims to have introduced that song to the Celtic fan base?
I have no idea.
Right. It was a Cornishman called Chris Morris, right? This is the story. I'm just going to put the story out there, and you can come in and tell me I'm talking rubbish, but this is the story. So at one point over the last 7 years, we introduced Chris Morris to Acsom, and he did a wee interview, and it's on the YouTube channel. And I'd love to follow that up. In fact, he might be a future guest on This Is Acsom at some point, if he's ever up the roads. And famously, his parents had a Morris's Cornish pasties company, right? Quite famous, didn't they? And Chris Morris inherited this, by the way, right? But obviously, his mother and his mother's mother were Irish. So he was part of this Jack Charlton team. And on one of the first trips away as a Celtic player with the Irish team, he's rooming with big Niall Quinn. Remember big Niall Quinn? Brilliant big striker. I always wanted him to sign for Celtic, actually. And he's a mad Celtic fan, Patrick, right? So he says to Chris, he's asking what's it like to play against Rain? All this kind of stuff. And then Chris said, you know, one of the best things that I've enjoyed is we go to all these CSC dances. This is something I think Jock's team was really, you know, adamant that players would go to them. Billy McNeil continued that tradition. Players would go to CSC dances. Apparently there was a folder during the centenary season. Every week there was 2 or 3 dances, and players had a kind of like rota, and they would go out. You don't see it these days, but Chris Morris was going to one with Peter Grant, and Grant says, well, Chris, I'm going to have to prepare you here because at some point during the night, they will ask you to sing a Celtic song. You will be given the mic and you're going to have to sing. And he was like, well, what do I sing? And Peter Grant said, well, just start singing Hail, Hail. And by the time you get to the bit where you don't know the words, they're all singing anyway and they'll no notice, right? So he was telling this story to Niall Quinn whilst they're on international duty in a hotel room somewhere. And Quinny was like, no, you need to sing an Irish ballad. You need to sing an Irish ballad at these things. Now, apparently, we're talking Walkman days, Patrick. You might not remember them. John and I will remember them, right? Walkmans with cassettes, right? And you had to carry these things about. Some of them had a clip for your belt. Very, very of their time. And he had a tape and he played Chris Morris, The Fields of Athenry, and he wrote down the lyrics for him. True story. So the next time he goes to a CSC dance and he's asked to sing a song, he starts to sing The Fields. So what we're talking here, late 80s, probably, late 80s, he just signed for Celtic in 87. And Chris Morris claims, that years later he comes up to a game after he's left the club. He went to Middlesbrough and all this. He comes up for a game at Hampden and somebody shouted over to him, there's the man that gave us The Fields. And he claims ownership of giving the Celtic fans the impetus to start singing The Fields after night. Now, later on, I end up at a tournament, and who's playing for the Ireland select? Niall Quinn. And I asked him his side of the story, and he said it was 100% accurate. Whether or not Chris Morris was responsible for that song, I do not know. Let me know in your comments. When was the first time you heard it at Celtic Park? Was it before Chris Morris signed for the club? Sounds genuine to me, Paddy.
What I take from that is I can't imagine going to Celtic Park and having never heard The Fields of Athenry. It's such a prominent and key part of the songbook on match days and away days and all that sort of stuff and nights out. So I really cannot imagine it. But it's when you look back through the history, there's obviously a period in time before You'll Never Walk Alone was sung. There's obviously a period in time before Glenn Daly's It's a Grand Old Team to Play For. There was days before Tony Mowbray brought the huddle to the team. It's all hard. It's quite hard to imagine for me. But it's
along with a Walkman, Patrick.
That's quite hard to
I'm well
imagine
aware
as well.
I know what a Walkman is. I don't remember them, but I know what it is. But no, it's all a fascinating part of the club's history, and it is important to share stories like these on platforms like these about how it was introduced and when it was introduced and where it comes from. And I've obviously never heard that story before. I didn't even realise The Fields of Athenry was such a recent addition to the songbook. So it's one of shock, I suppose, would be my reaction.
It's the same as Grace, isn't it? Grace, these songs have.
Yeah.
I mean, let's face it. The Irish cultural landscape is littered with fantastic songs about being oppressed by the Brits, basically. So there are endless romantic songs, and there's plenty there that still haven't been used, and they're absolute scorchers as well. Without any ability to offend anybody, because that's not what they're about. It's about the romance and the history, and with none of the contentious bits in between, even if they're about people who were involved in contentious things at the time. So it's there's plenty of them there, and it would be great to see. You'd like to see the songbook revamped every now and then, and it would be, I'd be keen for a few more songs like that to be in the songbook, to be fair.
I've always felt, John, that we're very creative in that respect, Celtic fans.
Yeah.
When you're watching a game, probably on the box, and you just hear the generic football chants, and you think to yourself, is that all you've got? Is that all you've got? And then you look at the songbook that Celtic have got, it's quite astonishing. I'm just putting that out there. I'm not saying it's gospel. I spoke to Chris Morris. I spoke to Niall Quinn. When do you remember The Fields of Athenry being sung at Celtic Park? Let us know in the comments field, because I remember reading a book once Pat Woods, I think, done the research for it. They spoke to a fan who was at the 7-1 game, right? So this precedes when Liverpool sang You'll Never Walk Alone. And he claims, the fan who was at the game claims Celtic fans sang Walk On that day, the 7-1 game, 1957. So, you know, a lot of the time it's passed through history just by word of mouth, John. There's nothing documented. Who knows the first time it happened? But when did you first remember it?
But you get random stuff happening. You take there's the Irish rugby. Suddenly started, all their fans started singing Zombie.
That's right. Yeah.
This year. And even being Ireland, even that was contentious. You know, but they only started, it was a Munster fans, I think, started singing it just because it was a good tune. And, you know, the rugby, there's plenty of stoppages. So they started singing it and it picked up momentum. And all of a sudden, you know, there it is. It's in the songbook now and it will not go away. You know, so weird things happen sometimes for no reason at all. At least there's a backstory to that. You know, the Chris Morris one. At least there's something there. But yeah, no, it's great that the fans. I always wonder though, is it just the groups, right? Because you know, like the boys and the Green Brigade, does it all come from them? Because nobody else has got the bottle to stand up and start belting out a song that's never been sung before. Who does that?
Exactly.
You know, how does it get introduced to the ground? You know, surely it's got to be introduced in the pubs. Or do you say the CSCs? It's got to be introduced somewhere first so that more than one guy knows that it's going to happen. You know, it's great that we have people who are constantly thinking these up, like Wannabe Edward and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, people, I mean, you know, it's well past me as a Celtic granda. I mean, you're talking, oh, we sing this song to this tune. I'm like, I've no idea what tune you're talking about, mate. That's not something I've ever heard before. You know, is this one after Frank Sinatra on my playlist? Hang on.
You're not into Serbian techno, are you, John? This is the problem. The remix version. I love all that stuff. I love the history, and I also love that there's always stuff to find out and explore about Celtic Football Club, Patrick, no matter how much you read and listen. And obviously, we talk about it an hour every day. And I think I might have mentioned that in the past on here, but it's the first time you've heard it. So at least one person's heard it for the first time. Johnny Tiny Hands, there you are. 10 in a row. Is that what you're looking at there, Donny? Would have Josh Doig over Kieran Tierney. There's a big part of this, Patrick, where we're attached to him because of who he is. And there's a romanticism around it. And he's one of ours and all this kind of stuff. When you get all that, there probably are better options out there for 10 million, aren't there?
Yeah, there probably are. Value for money, especially when you take the age. I know he's only just turned 27 a few days ago, but I think Josh Doig, I want to say, is about ages with Aaron Hickey, maybe 20 or 21. I believe he plays in Italy. I couldn't tell you which team he plays for. Obviously, Aaron Hickey, sort of one of the many that got away, and he was in our system. We could have signed him from Hearts. He's went to, I think it was Italy and then Brentford, his path, and out of our budget now. But Josh Doig, I think, is still in Italy, I want to say. Probably not as good as Hickey, but, you know, he looked a decent player at Hibs. I thought it was maybe an option a few years ago, but one that we never pulled the trigger on. But no, the point's a good one, that for 10 million, we probably could get someone with, you know, maybe not the same talent as Tierney, but the potential to reach Tierney's level. And it might take a year or two to get up to speed, but as much as I've said for years that we can definitely upgrade on Taylor, he's not the worst player in the squad to have for the next year or two.
Just to be clear, Patrick, is that you advocating for a £10 million project player?
That's what it sounded like, John. It sounded like that, didn't it?
It could be. It could be. I'd like us to sign a project for 10 million. That'd be a good project. But no, I mean, you can probably get a youth player who looks really, really promising, you know, for maybe 3 or 4 million, and then maybe in a year or two when they come good, you know, you can either cash in or get a good few years out of them. But you know, there probably are more strategic ways of signing another left back that might benefit us sort of longer term in the future. Whether it's Josh Doig, whether it's Aaron Hickey, whether it's Kieran Tierney, I don't know. But you know, there are more pertinent issues in the squad, I would say. You know, goalkeeper and sort of left centre half would be my 2 priorities, and then if O'Reilly goes, you need to replace him as well. But you know, left back is an area I've said for years we can definitely upgrade on, and you know, hopefully it's something the club are looking at. if it ends up being Tierney, I'll have no complaints. But he's probably not the best option available to us right now. Which actually, I know Paddy Sinnott was quite passionate on Twitter a few days ago about Johnny Hayes. I've not got a tremendous problem with Johnny Hayes coming into the club, but it's another one of those situations where, is he the best possible coach we could have got if we were looking to recruit a coach? Or is it a case of, come on in, Johnny, we'll give you a few years' experience and you can sort of spread your wings and go and coach elsewhere? I sort of question, when you're spending 10 to 15 million on a youth and women's training facility at Barrowfield, what is the point of that if you're not going to get the best quality coaches available to you? And, no harm to Johnny Hayes, but he's probably not the best available coach we could have got last week when we signed him up again.
If it's a one-off, Patrick, you don't even notice it. But when you look at, listen, and it's nothing personal against any of the names I'm about to mention, you go from John Kennedy to Darren O'Dea to Stephen McManus to Johnny Hayes, and you do ask the question, are they the best for the role that they're in? And it is something whereby, on the one hand, I love to see the fabric of the club, John. I love to see it every time I look at that dugout. I mean, the point I said about John Kennedy is the man who signed John Kennedy was Willie McStay. The man who signed Willie McStay was Sean Fallon. Sean Fallon was signed by Jimmy McGrory. Jimmy McGrory was signed by Willie Nailey. So there's a bloodline, and I get that it's very important to maintain your identity. But you can sometimes appear, John, that it's jobs for the boys, can't you, at times?
Well, essentially, it's the two different arguments, isn't it? So these guys are all appropriately qualified. Johnny Hayes that was Paddy's point when he was writing his blog the other week. Johnny Hayes is well qualified. So you've got this backbone of sort of Celtic culture and identity through those guys. That is obviously a very, very good thing. How important is that relative to just basically, trying to find the best coaches in the world, no matter who they are? And the honest truth is, we do not have a proper scouting and recruitment system for players, never mind coaches. So I think it's pretty fanciful of us to suggest that they're going to be able to find lower level coaches from around the world, because they simply aren't looking. If there's someone who's qualified to do the job, knows a bit about the club, they know them, they're just going to get them in. There's no global search for coaches in Celtic. That's just not happening. If they could do that for players, would be off to a good start. But there's no chance of doing it for less important roles down the club. Although the argument, very strong argument, as a matter of fact, is they are in fact crucial roles, potentially more important ultimately than the manager of the first team, because these guys are supposed to be producing elite level players, and that's going to be so crucial to our survival. And we just haven't, the last time I checked, as I did when I first came on the pod, I went back over the last sort of 22, maybe, about 22, 23 years of the academy. And essentially, Kieran Tierney was the only thing that made it break even. So if I hadn't been for Kieran Tierney, even including the values of current players that come through the academy, the academy would have been a massive financial drain on the club. It just wouldn't have been worth it. So, are we hoping that the academy is going to produce like a Kieran Tierney every 20 odd years? And the other thing is as well now, with the vast gaps that there are in finances, which didn't exist during a lot of that period, we can't, like see your Ben Dokes and all the rest of it. I mean, you can't keep these kids hostage. And if they're that good, which they obviously are, if you've got a sort of generational talent that Ben Doak could be, then all of a sudden the Premier League boys are in for him, and we just can't compete with that. And you can't blame a 16-year-old kid, no matter what team he supports, for having his head turned by vast, almost unimaginable sums of money. It's that's setting up his family, his parents, his brothers, sisters, his friends. That's setting everyone up for life, and you cannot blame them for going. So that question is actually interesting. We cannot protect our best assets from that system. So are we really saying then, sorry, I'm just coming at the top of my head here, are we really saying that what we're looking to do is produce guys who are either very late bloomers or very clearly second tier at that age with the potential to do better? Because if they're half decent, they'll be picked off from the academy, basically. So it's a real difficult one, and it's not an easy fix either.
The big one, John, we spoke about this other week there in relation to the kind of wages. I think I gave the example of having dealings with a young guy who was on trial there, and at the time they were on about between £600 and £800 a week. And these were kind of youth players, and that was Mikey Johnston's team. And I think that when it gets to the point where a team like Man City, Blackburn, or even Watford, who have taken our players in the past, Bayern Munich, they can, it's nothing, it's a drop in the ocean. They can give them 5-10 times that without them even having kicked the ball in the first team. The fact that Ben Dokes had to pull out of the Euros is one of my biggest disappointments. I was really looking forward to any kind of cameo appearance from the kid. I think that I'm so excited to see how he develops, even though it's not on the hoops, unfortunately. And I'm going to have to bring a few of these comments in about what we've been talking about, because it's great. It's great fun to digress, John. We've been talking about the Fields of Athen, right? If you want to go and have a look at a version of this song you might not have heard, there is a band called the Durruti Column who were on Factory Records back in the 1980s. This was Walkman territory, Paddy, and they did a version. They did a version of the Fields of Athen Rye. Go into YouTube, type in the Durruti Column, the Fields of Athen Rye. You may be surprised when you hear Factory Records, Manchester band. You might be surprised what you might hear.
There is some dispute, Paul John, about what's the best Celtic song. Kevin Graham, is obviously commenting there. He seems to be quite convinced that it's Rastafinian by the Celtic Cross Collective, which I believe Kevin might have had something to do with.
I think he is the man behind that particular song. And by the way, we are going to be filming a video for that in the style of A Wander in Paradise. So watch this space, because it might be more Fat Les Vindaloo than A Wander in Paradise. But let's have a look at that. It's happening. It's definitely happening. Studs of Lanigan. I love Studs Lanigan's comment here. The Sons of Donegal, CSC, brought the Fields of Athen Rye to Celtic Park in 1989. There you go. The big question though, Studs, did Chris Morris visit your CSC before you sang it at the stadium? That's the big question, because he might have done. Barry M82 can remember listening to Michael Jackson, Madonna, and Kylie Minogue on my Sony Walkman in the late 80s. Wow. I was still listening to Oasis in the 90s on a Walkman doing my paper round, but there you go. And we've got George Doherty watching from Dubai on holiday. Hail, hail. I hope you enjoy yourself. Now, here's a point Danielle makes, and I think you make it really well. Owen Beck, remember every time he played against us, I think on one occasion we got the better of him, but he's always impressed when he's been on loan at Dundee. He's obviously a Liverpool player. He fits all the model, young, talented and sellable. I think he's the no-brainer. Makes sense, that, doesn't it, Paddy? He's always impressed against us.
Yeah, that was a link in January, wasn't it? He'd sort of done really well at Dundee. I think I don't know if it ended sort of naturally or he was recalled by Liverpool.
He was recalled. He played one game. He went down, played one game for him, and then they couldn't. I don't even know if he played again, but because he was recalled, he couldn't then go into another club.
Aye, that was a strange one, John. A cup game, wasn't it? Played in a cup game,
something like that. Yeah. Completely irrelevant. And I think it was. I don't know if it was deliberate, but it seemed to be deliberate. I don't know why they would have done that. Otherwise, because it certainly wasn't important for Liverpool, wasn't it? It certainly wasn't important for them. So
I think they might have had a left back crisis, but is that the most important thing? We're calling a guy for Dundee to play one game. But I mean, no, I mean Daniel's right. He does fit all the sort of all the categories of what we are sort of looking for in a player. The only worry I would have is that in that 7-1 game, Yang turned him inside out. And I know what we all think of Yang nowadays. But I mean, Yang did play well that night, and we obviously beat them 7-1. But, it depends how expensive an option it is. Because if he's on similar wages to Ben Doak as a youth player at Liverpool, I mean, how much are we going to have to pay him to start off with? How much are they going to want as a fee? Because if they're recalling him for a cup game, fair enough, he might not be a first team player, but they obviously feel confident in playing him for a game or two. And being in the Premier League, they'll probably want to command some sort of a fee. So, as much as he fits all the sort of young youth categories, it might end up being quite an expensive project. It might be my 10 million project I was talking about 10 minutes ago. Let's hope not. But no, I mean, he seemed to do well at Dundee. He was rated quite highly. So it was one that we were linked with in January. And I wouldn't have too many complaints if we went from, again, this window, because I don't think Bernaby is, he's not got a future at the club, no way. And I liked Adam Montgomery. I thought he looked really good going forward. Great attacking player. Always wanted to do something with the ball, but I don't think he's had an appearance for Celtic in over 2 years. I know he's played, several games out on loan and stuff, and he's recovering from an injury. But as much as I like him, I can't see him becoming a Celtic player either. So we're definitely in need of at least one left back, I think.
Well, unfortunately, what we had over the last couple of years was a very cohesive approach to recruitment. We knew exactly the kind of people we were targeting, and we did it really badly with the wrong guy. But at least there was an approach. At least there was an idea. There was a vision of how we were going to do this. And now I don't know what we're at, because at the same time we're talking about Ben Doak, we're looking at signing, apparently, according to the rumours, a 35-year-old goalkeeper. So I don't understand where that thinking. Well, I do understand where that thinking is, but it's really sort of scattergun, isn't it? It's just, it sounds like these things are all being taken, individually, rather than, there's a vision for what we want to do here. But, I can understand, because we don't have, of course it's going to be a random and scattergun approach for me in terms of what's happening, because we don't have, anyone behind the scenes there doing it. So this is just going to be Brendan Rodgers essentially going, look, I need someone who's good in this position. We need someone who'll be up for the Champions League. He's 35. Okay, that's not great. Can he give me one good season? All this sort of stuff, because this is the danger. This is what Mark Lowell was supposed to avoid. The short-termism of a manager who has to produce results immediately. So with someone like that in the background, you're supposed to be looking at the long term and the short term. Instead of that, we just looked at the long term and signed a load of guys who, maybe they could come good, but we don't have time to wait and find out, because there's too many of them. It's not like we signed 5 first team players and 4 projects. They were all projects. So that balance just can't, we can't live with that balance. But again, it just seems to me quite sort of random, some of the things that have been thrown out there, and you think it's sort of weird. And when did Kelleher go from 20 million to 10 million? I thought Kelleher was like 20 million, all of a sudden he's 10 million. I don't know, when did that happen? Just because it didn't suit the story, because then whoever was writing these things, couldn't make it stick that Celtic were going to pay 20 million for a keeper, so we just reduced it to 10. Now we can still have that conversation.
Yeah, we can still get the clicks, John. This is it.
That's exactly it.
Still believable. Let's reduce that, and we'll get another wee run at this with the ad revenue. You can see it a mile off. I think there's some great comments coming through, which I'm going to share with everyone tuning in. Caplo Mark, yes. Paul McGrath, Ronnie Whelan, Ray Houghton, goes on and on. All 3 of those players could and should have played with Celtic. Ray Houghton, obviously, Castle Milkboy. Paul McGrath, twice he was up at Celtic Park for signing talks. Twice. Once under Liam Brady, once under Billy McNeil. And Ronnie Whelan, Celtic looked at Ronnie Whelan as well when he was over in Ireland, but we missed out on him. Great sides, great memories. And there's a lot of information coming in regarding You'll Never Walk Alone. Starting with Barry M, 82. Yes, it was Jerry and the Pacemakers who sang it in the 60s. And from what I understand, that's when Liverpool adopted that song, because in the Kop, it wasn't just that particular song. They would adopt pop songs all the time. They would sing Beatles songs in the 1960s in the Kop. But as Uncle Nobby Steamboat quite rightly points out, Celtic sang the Perry Como version and You'll Never Walk Alone in 1952. Liverpool sang Jerry the Pacemakers first, though. So basically, Liverpool nicked the song after Celtic. That's what we're trying to say here, Uncle Nobby. And I'm just putting it out there as well. Paul McLean, it was written for a film called Carousel. Patrick reminds us it was Pete St. John who wrote The Fields of Athenry. Kevin Graham loves Serbian techno, interestingly enough. And John Keenan says it can't be that difficult to get a left back for around £6 million. Couple of things on the left back situation then. Patrick says about buying a left back for 10 million quid. Let's go back to Tierney. Who have we brought into the club since Tierney? So we bring in Greg Taylor, right? What was he? A couple of million? 2.5 million from Kelly? Yeah. We bring in Bolly Bolingoli. Remember him? 3.5 million quid. Rapid Vienna. 3.5 million legends. A legend in his own peacetime, as we used to say. Bolly Bolingoli. We bring in, who was the guy with the beads in his hair? Remember, I've removed him from my mind.
Moritz Bauer.
Diego Laxalt.
That was Laura's, the love of Laura's life, wasn't it? That was
Diego. And the thing is, we brought him in for a season. So there's a loan fee for a player like that. You know, the Shane Duffy loan fee was 2 million quid. There's a loan fee for Laxalt. I don't know how much it was. Let's say 1.5, 2 million. AC Milan player. Playing in the World Cup 11 after his performances for Uruguay and all this kind of stuff. Right. Who came after him then? It was Alexandro Bernabe, 3.75 million quid. So you've got the best part of 4 million. You've got 3.5 for Bolingoli. You've got 1.5 to 2 million for Laxalt. So Patrick, to actually shell out 10 million, I would rather that and get some real quality than this procession of guys that just don't reach the standard. And I mean, I think Taylor's done really, really well. My only issue, I think, with Beck would be physicality. I don't know if you're getting an upgrade on the physicality, because that's been a weak area for us, hasn't it? At the back post on the left-hand side. Are you buying too similar a player physically if you go for a guy like Beck?
Yeah, that is the worry. You know, I'm not sure exactly what age he is. I think he is only about 19 or 20, isn't he? And he is, I think he must be taller than Taylor, just from memory. He's got to be taller than Taylor.
3 inches.
So maybe, you know, those, there you go. They all count, you know. Those diagonal balls across to Taylor, you know, he's coped with them all right, but you know, a bit more height wouldn't hurt, and you know, over time, hopefully, Beck would be able to bulk up. You know, you're sort of you're harking back to O'Neill and Strachan days, and we showed a bit of fight and we were a bit competitive in Europe based on the physicality and the strength and the tall players we had on the side. And even under Strachan, we might not have had the same quality. We had it in parts with McGeady and Nakamura, but you still had that physicality to compete at that level. And I like to think Brendan's identified that, and we can bring guys like that and guys who aren't maybe the finished article, guys who aren't quite at the level of Hatate with their passing range, but can still fight and compete at the highest level. So maybe over time, if we were to go for Beck, maybe he could upgrade his physicality, get a bit stronger. But certainly on height, he's got Taylor beat. But I mean, if you're talking about money, you know, I've seen these rumours about Kyogo leaving and what would be the right price and all that, and you think to yourself, if we've got, you know, tens upon tens of millions in the bank, we've got the season ticket money, the Champions League money, the O'Reilly money. We're bringing in so much money. We don't actually need to have a right price for Kyogo. The only reason we would sell Kyogo is if Kyogo doesn't want to be here or Rodgers doesn't think he's going to play him. We don't actually need any more money. We've got hundreds of money for the transfer fees that Nicholson is prepared to sign off on. We don't
John's
need any
laughing
more
so
money.
mad. That's so quotable. We don't need any more money. We've got hundreds of money.
Hundreds of money.
We do.
That is class.
I mean,
I just see Peter Lowell round the boardroom table. Lads, we've got hunters of money.
We've got hunters of money. Hunters. Love it.
I mean, we're too busy counting it all. We don't know how much it is, but we've got tens upon tens of millions. And, you know, for the fees that we're willing to pay, I know we've had the Mark Lawwell saga over the last 2 seasons, but our record fee's 9 million. I mean, if we were to sell O'Reilly, bring in the Champions League money, you could spend that 5, 6, 7 times over and still have cash in the bank. So when it comes to, I mean, I don't want to sell Kyogo, so I'm coming from a biased perspective. But when you're talking about what is the right price and stuff like that, if we really want to go out and get a quality left back, I think the only thing holding us back is scouting and the recruitment department. We've got enough money to pay the wages, to pay the fee, whether it's Tierney, Beck, Hickey, Doig, whoever it is. My big concern is being able to actually identify a player of the quality we want, as opposed to paying the fee. Because as I said a minute or two ago, we've got hundreds of money and we can afford it.
I've now got your slogan for your T-shirt. John's is testicular fortitude. Yours is hunters of money. Again, you'll not remember the Harry Enfield character, John. Loads of money. Remember him?
Loads of money. Loads of money. Superb character. You're just saying, in terms of the physicality thing, I think that's incredibly important. We are really lacking in physicality and strength and presence, and you know. Again, when we get to the top level, so we have to think about this sort of in reverse, don't we? About how teams in Scotland play us. So, you know, if we're looking at the Champions League, what's the first thing we need to do? We need to make them play at their best to beat us. You know, so we need to make it difficult for them. We need to, you know, be physical and awkward. And, you know, again, you know, I'm not, suggesting that we're, you know, playing like, you know, hammer throwers, but guys who have physicality, who have presence, who can impose themselves on people, that's really, really, really important. The issue is nowadays, of course, that getting guys like that at European level, it's very, very expensive. So that's why we're lacking physicality. It's not because the manager doesn't want it or didn't want it. It's just those guys, you know, this is why people, I think, are really looking at Lowell coming back, not Mark Boson. So basically, they're looking at him coming back, and I suggested, you know, you're looking at his stats. His stats, was it Duco James did it? His stats in comparison to Matt O'Reilly's stats, that when he was in the same league essentially, were better than O'Reilly's pretty much in every area apart from assists and passing. But he's a defensive midfielder, so that's exactly what you would expect. But he's obviously capable. He's gone out there, and I was suggesting maybe is he a long-term replacement for Callum? The less Callum plays, you know, the more we start managing Callum, you know, we start inserting him into the process. And again, you've got people going, "Oh, don't talk rubbish. He's nowhere near as good on the ball." And you're like, "What age is he? 21." Right. So you know, at the same breath, we're talking about guys with potential, and then we're dismissing a guy who's already our player on the basis that he can never get better. You know, it's just sometimes I don't know if people don't think in a very logical fashion. You know, clearly the guy can improve. I mean, where was Callum at that age? Was he not at Notts Forest, or was he a bit younger?
Callum, you're right, John. Callum didn't make his first team debut till he was 21.
So again, the boy has potential, and he looks exactly what I'm talking about. He's a physical presence. He's big, strong, powerful, brave, and quick. And whether he can improve, you know, passing and stuff like that, yeah, we'll find out. But he certainly, for me, you would want to be looking at him certainly alongside Owata for who is going to be the person who is filling in for Callum McGregor when he's not playing. And we are going to have to manage the number of games in Europe and the fact that these guys aren't getting game time. I mean, I was talking to my friend about this the other day. Is it not the case now that if we're going to keep all these guys happy and keep them sharp. Nobody wants to be on the bench all year. So at the very least, do what they do in England and give them the League Cup. Is that acceptable?
I think it's a great shout, John. I mean, the thing with Jim Orr talks about cups differently from the way I view them. I want Celtic to win everything, right? I'm greedy that way. I do. I just want us to win every trophy we go in for. However, he's talking about the importance of something like the League Cup, John, as being really vitally important to winning a treble and a clean sweep and all that. But if you want to progress the youth or the non-contributing players and they need competitive games, and there's a severe lack of them within the structure of Scottish football at the moment, then yeah, I don't see there being a problem with John. And I remember there was threats of fines and all that. Remember when the English team started doing it down south for the League Cup down there? Oh, because it's going to affect sponsorship, etc., etc. I understand all that, but at the same time, Celtic need to progress our players. We need to give them proper competitive games of football. Why not do it in the League Cup?
Yeah, and again, this goes back to the fundamental problems we have is there being no reserve football and there's no path for the youth to get into the first team because there's no way to prove themselves unless they're out on loan. And then as a team they're out on loan at an equivalent level, are they learning anything? Are they getting any better? Or do we leave them in the Scottish League where they can hurt their opposition? Right? So there's all these issues, but there's no clear pathway into the first team. And because there's no reserve football, even the guys on the bench, all you've got is training. Training it's very difficult to change a manager's mind if there's a guy settled in place and he's producing on a regular basis, because you might look better in training, but this guy's producing it and he can see it. So how does he know that you're not going to let him down for sure? You just take the safe option, same as anyone else will do. You take the safe pair of hands, especially in critical positions like centre-back and stuff like that. So, without any reserve football, without youth team football, how else? What do we do? You loan out your entire squad? Again, it's a real problem, and the structure. This is where the SFA sort of fall down. The structure of the game in Scotland, to me, is an absolute shambles. You've got no youth football of any, meaningful level, for the academy kids, and you have no reserve team football for the older pros. So basically, what have you got? So you're going from the age of 16 to the age of, 26, and you could still be sitting on the bench.
I think the big thing with that, John, is in order to make sure that your player is ready for the first team, there's a bridge between youth football and first team football, and it does not exist in Scotland. And Celtic are a victim of that, because the reserve league was removed and dismantled because the majority of football clubs in Scotland didn't want to ring fence the money that it costs, which was a 5-figure sum, to ensure that they had a reserve team. And that was the issue. And it will probably never return. But every time you speak to an ex-player, and by the way, we'll be talking to one in a couple of hours up at Barra's Art and Design for episode 3 of This Is Acsom, they go on about, the part of their development that was so important, and that was the reserve team, whereby you're playing alongside ex-pros in terms of senior pros that might not be first-team picks, John, coming back for injury, players who are millions of pounds worth of talent. A friend of mine I was at school with, he signed for Celtic on an S form, and he ended up playing for the reserves. And he was actually the captain of the reserve team the day that Mark Viduka, then called Marco Viduka, played his first game in the hoops. Remember when he signed and he disappeared because he had mental health issues, John, for a while. He went AWOL. We got him back. He played a reserve game. And my mate played in the same team as Marco Viduka, an Australian international player who I think we'd signed for £3.5 million for Croatia Zagreb. What are you going to learn? You're going to learn loads from a player like that, just by playing alongside them. And I think that is much missed in the Scottish game. Barry N, 82, is a big issue still, I think. I hope it is, right? I'm going to tell you something. See, back in 1997, I've raised money for the homeless through the big issue by putting on a gig, John. My band were the headliners. I was the singer. Guess what the band were called?
Big Issue.
There was a big issue with my singing, I'll tell you that. But look at Paddy. He's dying to laugh because he can't imagine that actually this happened. Back in the day, Paddy, everybody was in bands. It was just something you did. I'm not going to tell you the name of the band. Let us know your suggestions in the comments, and I might reveal it tomorrow. In fact, JP Mason probably was at a few of the gigs, and he might tell you as well. Stephen Gallagher, if KT can get through the Euros injury-free, then it's a no-brainer for me. It's going to be interesting to watch guys like that, McKenna, who's been linked to Celtic, Stuart Armstrong, who's been linked to Celtic, and see how they perform, and then maybe the change of mind in terms of people's opinions on whether or not we should sign them.
Okay, can I just say, Paul, I because I don't follow Scotland, obviously I will for the Euros and stuff, but because I've not been following the situation really, absolutely delighted. I don't know I'm very late to this party, obviously. Delighted to see Big Tony Ralston is now number one pick right back.
Brilliant.
And
Brilliant.
The benefit to us from that is potentially massive. Because the other thing is as well, Johnson didn't have his best season this year, and he was found wanting on a few occasions. And I never thought initially when he came in, I thought it was a close run thing between him and Tony when Tony was playing at his best. Mm-hmm. They both have different attributes, but Johnson, his defensive positioning and his lack of stopping crosses coming in, things like that, it's definitely a weakness in his game, and it's not a weakness that Tony has. So, and they're both decent going forward. And if Tony gets his spirits back up again, gets his confidence back up, we have a real fight in our hands on that side, which is brilliant.
I love to see it, John. I love to see Tony Ralston being the first pick at right back for this Scotland team. And when you look at not the testicular fortitude, the mental fortitude shown by Tony Ralston during that period where he was basically a joke figure, Paddy, but for about 18 months at Celtic. He was a joke figure. Nobody wanted him in the team. Comes back in under Ange. Look at him now. Look at him now. I think he's a shining example for any young player coming through at Celtic Park. The urban culture, Tierney, a no for me. But anyway, on to the main business. Who's painting abandoned for the day? It's Acsom time. I'm glad we could be of some kind of assistance during your many chores, the urban culture. There is always that time where you've got chores to do and you start doing them half an hour before the missus comes in. And you just go rapid to try and get them all done, Paddy. You've got all that to learn, mate. Paddy Lavery, spend the money elsewhere, says Paddy. Lesson number 7, if KT is to happen, it will be this summer. Yeah, when else? When else he gets a move, and then again, if you think he's out his price range, then out, it will definitely happen if he gets another move. And John is suggesting that it might be someone like Aston Villa or Newcastle, not Celtic. Okay. Thanks everybody for getting involved. It's been great fun. We are going to go right now and film episode 3 of This Is Acsom. So what to do to make sure you don't miss that? We're going to have an ex-Celt on, or someone with a Celtic state of mind, every single week, Friday night, is subscribe to the channel. Give us a big thumbs up, hit the notifications bell. There's 6 European Cups on the right-hand side there for all the awards that Acsom have been bestowed with. Thank you to the support of all these people that tune in. And we are hoping to win 1 or 2 this year again. The link for that is underneath this video as well.
Can I raise? You're clearly going to win these awards. We're all going to vote, and I hope everyone else in the comments does, because it's worth it. But I have to raise an objection here that This Is Acsom, great show, but I have to object to all the eye candy that have been chosen to sit alongside you and host it. Where are the fat old men? Hey, have you been discriminated against?
I'm the host, John. I'm flying the flag. I'm flying the flag. Listen, John, you're absolutely right. It's a great fun show. We did a lot of interviews in the early days of Acsom, and it was always my intention to bring them back on the screen. And it's just great. It's brilliant fun, and you're always getting a wee look into what ex-players think of the Celtic team of the here and now, but using anecdotes from the past and experiences from the past, which can be insightful and funny, and it's great. It's really great fun. We have won a few awards in the past, not to labour the fact, but Best in Video Creators, Best Podcast Creators, Best Podcast International, Best Content Creators. So they're actually the categories we can win an award in, there's a lot in there that we can't win because we're, they're for Premiership teams and stuff. So if you fancy it, the link is underneath this video. Go in, give us a wee vote. And it means that I go down and rub shoulders with the likes of Emma Jones and all that doing at the award ceremony. It's a difficult life, Paddy, but somebody's got to do it. And that's what happened last year down at Anfield. So thank you all for getting involved in that. And yeah, I'll let you know how it goes tomorrow. I've not told you who the guest is yet, have I? Today?
No.
For Friday. Shall I tell you or shall I just reveal it in a picture once?
Oh, go on, tell us. I'm terrible at keeping secrets. Go on.
Right, today we will be joined by Bobby Petter. Bobby Petter is going to join us on the show today.
Yeah, that was unexpected.
Yeah, a former teammate of Henrik Larsson at Feyenoord. He obviously joined Celtic from Ipswich. He was told all about the club by Tony Mowbray, who was teammate at Ipswich, and he came under the forgettable tenure of John Barnes. But he came back into his own, obviously, under Martin O'Neill. He tells a story that Tommy Burns was a massive influence during that period. And he will be best remembered for the 6-2 game and his performance against Ajax. But there's loads more to Bobby Petter than meets the eye. Will we be doing a DJ set? Who knows? You never know on This Is Acsom. But he does like a wee bit of the old DJ. I don't know if he's into Serbian techno as such, but he might play us a few tunes. Thanks, everybody, for getting involved. And thank you to Patrick McGilp and John Yogi Hughes for joining me on A Celtic State of Mind.
Hell.